since we're in the middle of winter, I thought it would be helpful to guide you guys through some tips and some tricks to have your houseplants thriving through the colder months. So just jumping right in with why we need different care for different seasons. So whatever is happening in your indoor environment is going to be affected, even if slightly, by the outdoor environment. And plants, even though they're very adaptable and very durable, they are sensitive to changes. And what I mean by sensitive is just that they sense changes. And they may have a little like tweaks that they need to go through to adjust and make it through the colder seasons. Most houseplants, I would say 90 to 100% of indoor plants are from the tropical regions of the world. So they're gonna like they're gonna like warm climates and humid environments. So typically in the wild, they're exposed to anywhere from like 60 to 100% humidity. And in the winter, your indoor space can be more like 5 to 10% for the average American household, and warm. So they're exposed to, in their natural habitat, anywhere from like 60 degrees at night to up to 90s during the day. So that's not always feasible inside, but we can at least get to a happy medium where the plants are happy and they're still growing through the winter seasons. Our next point is how the sun changes. So the sun and the temperature change during winter. So when not only is the sun less intense, it also has a different position in the sky. So if you have your plants near a west-facing window, for instance, in the summer, you might have had some direct sunlight at some point during the day. In the winter, it may have shifted completely and you may have completely different sun. So the first thing you're going to want to do is just take a general assessment of your space. Look at where your plants are right now and try to think back from spring and summer and what those conditions look like. If you have a photo maybe that you took from back then, scroll back, see if you can figure out like how the sun has changed at whatever time of day, and then make adjustments accordingly. So if you're realizing, hey, my plant hasn't really been growing since the summer and I got way more light in this spot, then look around and see if there's a sunnier spot you can move it to, or can you move it even closer to the window and without compromising the health of the plant. So if it's a plant like a calathea, for instance, that doesn't really want any direct sun at all, then keep that in mind when you're moving your plants around. Also, in terms of location, you're going to want to look for if any plants are near radiators, vents where hot air is or even cold air is blowing on them. They're not going to love any air, hot or cold, being blown on them. But yeah, radiators, any artificial heat sources, if you have a space heater, if your plant is near any of those artificial sources of heat, it's probably not going to be very happy. And you may start to notice, again, in the calathea, even in this monstera, the Swiss cheese plant, you may start to notice the leaves start to get a little crispy, a little brown at the edges, and that's it basically telling you, hey, we need more humidity. So ways that you can increase humidity if it is low in your space is add a humidifier. So specifically, I would put a humidifier near your plants and run it as often as you can just to supplement that little extra bit of moisture in the air. You can always use a pebble tray as well. So that just means getting a plate or a saucer, putting some pebbles, a thin layer of pebbles, as well as a thin layer of water, and then placing the plant on top so that it kind of starts to absorb that moisture. So jumping back to the temperature really quick, I know sometimes when we leave our space, our homes, some people tend to turn the heat off to conserve energy, and we're all for conserving energy. However, just keep in mind that your tropical houseplants are not going to tolerate temperatures below about like 55 degrees. I would even say don't dip below 60. So keep that in mind too. So the next point is watering. How much do you water during the winter? as a very like loose general rule of thumb, half as much as you would in spring and summer in the active growing months. Oh, there's a dog running around. Okay. So with that said, it's all going to be dependent on the plant, your unique indoor space, because your indoor space is its own little habitat, its own environment. And so you're going to have to adjust accordingly. So we have 3 different plants here today. We have a calathea, a monstera, and a ZZ. So all of these already require different amounts of water. So this calathea typically likes to stay pretty damp throughout the soil. As soon as you touch that top layer of soil and it's damp, then you know it's good. So this one could really be anywhere from 1 week to once every 2 weeks. Again, it'll depend on the plant in your own environment. So you're just gonna have to keep a close eye out. And as far as the monstera plants, like this one, this typically likes to dry out about maybe 1/3 of the way down the soil. So I usually say like the top 1 or 2 inches of soil needs to dry out before watering again. So again, you can wiggle the finger into that top layer of soil, feel around, see, you know, if it needs any more water, measure the levels. And this one in the winter could be anywhere from once every 2 to 3 weeks. But again, like if you're in South Florida, you could be watering it every week. And if you're in Minnesota, you could be watering it possibly even once a month, depending on how cold it is and how dry it is, basically how the soil retains water. So last we have the ZZ. This guy could be watered like once every 1 to 2 months. It's very forgiving and it likes to dry out almost completely before watering again. So again, depends on the plant, depends on your unique little biome. So another reason your plant needs less water in the winter is because the growth has substantially slowed. So because of that, it's not going to need extra nutrients to grow because it's not growing. It's not going to need extra water because it's not thirsty, because it's not actively growing. So that brings us to fertilizer. Cut back completely in winter and fall. Wait until spring to do things that are considered kind of stressful for your plant. So your plant during the winter is going to be a little more vulnerable than normal because it does have that stunted growth and it doesn't love the conditions. It's still adaptable, it's still healthy, it's still fine. It's just not necessarily thriving at its peak. So cut back on fertilizer. Don't actually fertilize at all. Wait till spring to start fertilizing again. And try to hold off on repotting unless it's absolutely necessary, like you have an issue in the soil, like root rot or pests or something where it's absolutely needs to be done. So hold off on repotting. Fertilizer propagating depends on the plant and how finicky it is. Unless it's actively growing, I would say don't propagate it. So, you know, if you're still getting some new shoots, like this guy's still unfurling new leaves like crazy, it would be totally okay in the winter to just snip one of these stems. And also during winter, I didn't bring one out here, but if you have an alocasia plant, those are very prone to dropping leaves and sometimes all of their leaves during the colder months. So don't be concerned if you have some leaf drop with normal plants and then alocasia type plants, you get full leaf drop. Keep the plant, keep watering it and taking care of it and giving the sunlight like you normally would. Alocasia plants have corms, so they may regrow a new plant during the spring. So always keep it, try to not overwater it, keep the same like soil indicator of moisture. and just keep going with the plant care. Winter can kind of wreak havoc on some houseplants, but with that said, I don't want that to discourage you from houseplants, because it's kind of just part of the process, and it's kind of a mindful process where you have to have awareness of what the plants need, but not get too attached to the idea of them always being perfect, because they're living things. And like us, they're never going to be completely in a state of perfection. They have ups and downs as living things. So just keep that in mind. Don't be too hard on yourself. And with that said, during winter, I actually love having my houseplants around, because they kind of offset that seasonal affective disorder. When we start to get a little low and a little depressive during the winter months, they have a way of perking us up. And actually, there's something called the biophilic response, and that is just being in the presence of plants can boost your overall well-being. And it's about how nature has an effect on us, and that can kind of translate indoors as well. So since we have less daylight right now during winter, it's important to implement the changes. And just as a really brief recap, think about your location, making changes as necessary. Think about how much you're watering, making changes again as necessary, and just really monitor your plants. And the last point is, since the plant is in a more vulnerable state right now, just check for pests. I actually recommend, when you're watering your plants, just take the time to kind of look at your plants, inspect them, inspect the leaves, the little crevices where stem meets. Look for any signs of distress in the plant and remedy immediately if you do find anything. Hold off on any major changes, no repotting, no major division or propagation, and just kind of wait for spring, basically. And what you do right now to support them will have so much impact on what happens during spring. So spring is kind of where we start to see that emergence of new growth, and things really start to take off. And then by summer, the plants are thriving. So what you do now, just keep that in mind. Don't get discouraged by growth that's kind of stunted. Just keep in mind that what you're doing and putting in place will have a really great impact in just a few weeks, few months, however far away you are. And good luck. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I will be sure to answer them. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe so I can keep making more. Thank you.